But
Not really, just kidding.
there we go. Chang is after Mohammed here. Chang here?
It's
Chang's
okay,
having a
it's okay,
confusion.
actually, we can just call you that.
There we go.
That's what we wanted.
I'm good.
Good.
So I'm using a webcam to just record.
Do I use the microphone?
It's underneath.
Is this plugged in?
Yeah, flip it on.
Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to NIU STEAM's Teen STEM Cafe Jobs of the Future. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to host our first in-person cafe for 2022. My name is Siri, and I'm joined by Roxana and Ruth, who's in the other room. And we are Teen STEM Cafe student volunteers, and we also have helpers.
Hello, my name's Sad. Nice to meet you all.
Before we begin, I'd like to thank NIU STEAM and DeKalb Public Library for their partnership to jointly bring these cafes to our teen audience. While these events are made for teens by teens, they would not be possible without the involvement of our adult leaders, Dr. Diamond from NIU STEAM and Ms. Susan Garlich from the DeKalb Public Library. Finally, thank you to the Teen Cafe sponsor, Pizza Villa of DeKalb, who will be providing pizza for our event today. Also, please save the date for our Spring STEM Cafe, which is April 30th. Now, throughout this cafe, we will be exploring the current and future STEM-related jobs and opportunities that will be helping to solve today's global issues. We have many guest speakers here today that will be speaking about careers in their fields of interest. They will show how teens can anticipate and prepare for the jobs of the future, jobs that will help preserve our world for future generations. Today, we are bringing to you eight-minute talks from experts in cutting-edge fields. First, we will have Mr. Jeffrey Spangenberger discussing lithium-ion battery recycling. Next, we will have Ms. Laura Elon with manufacturing and technology jobs, Dr. Kevin Martin with vertical farming, Dr. Mohammed Mohini with careers in biotechnology, Dr. Yingwen Cheng with renewable energy, Dr. Megan Brown with water resources, Mr. Antonio Deval discussing ecosystem restoration, and finally, Dr. Ji Tan with artificial intelligence. After these talks, we will divide into groups and rotate between each of the 8 stations for activities and in order to ask our speakers questions. We will be serving pizza at the end of the cafe, and it will be handed to you on the way out. Thank you. Start off, is this working? Okay. To start off, we'll do a quick icebreaker, being 2 truths and 1 lie. Now you can do this with anyone around you. Maybe you haven't ever talked to before. And you can tell 2 truths and have them guess the lie among your 2 truths and a lie. Should I really get to know somebody?
You want me to be your partner?
Sure, actually, yes. I don't know much about you.
That's good. Okay, so I was born in Oklahoma. I have 6 kids, and I hate cats. So
That's 3.
2 truths and a lie, right?
There you go.
So 2 truths and a lie.
You don't hate cats.
That is correct. Good job. Thank you.
Very good.
I'm 5'4".
Mhm.
I am here right now.
That's really good.
Are you though? Okay,
And I actually don't wear these glasses. These don't belong to me.
so you're here right now. That's the truth, right?
Are you sure?
So,
Well, that's the truth, yes.
okay. So that's the icebreaker if you guys want to play.
Sure.
You have to use your head to reach over here and make sure it's recording.
So we can hear from our speakers. So we can hear from some of our speakers. Okay. First will be Mr. Jeffrey Sandberg.
Your mic here.
Use it.
You guys hear me okay?
Everyone should use the mic.
Yeah.
I would put it in. Everyone should use it.
All right.
We also have a short introduction prepared for you. Would you like to hear that?
Yeah.
With the mic.
Mr. Spangenberger works at Argonne National Laboratory, where he's a materials recycling group leader in the Applied Materials Division, and leads the development of systems that separate recyclable materials and recycle waste streams into recyclable materials. Sorry. Today, we talk about lithium-ion battery recycling.
All right. Oh, and I need this computer unlocked. Does someone know password?
Laptop lab, all lowercase. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so actually, I'm here to talk about battery recycling, specifically electric vehicle battery recycling, because that's the new jobs that are going to be coming out, right? But I guess let me back up a bit before I start, I guess, getting into what I'm going to talk about. 8 minutes. Okay. My name is Jeff Spangenberger. I work at Argonne National Laboratory, which is about 25 miles southwest of Chicago. I would recommend that you guys check it out. It's actually a really good opportunity to do an internship, and you can learn about all the different stuff. It's almost like a college campus. We have a physics building, chemistry building, all this. So it's really cool. I've been there about 20 years. My background is chemical engineering. It is nothing like I thought it was going to be. I wanted to be a train engineer actually when I was a little kid, and it's funny how it all just kind of works. I would recommend, this is just me on my soapbox, but get out there and experience what it is, because it's a lot different than just looking at a book. Get out, do an internship, see what's really out there. What does it mean to be a chemical engineer? I really had no idea until I had my first class, or at least I thought I did. So anyway, let me get down from my soapbox and get into what I do right now. I'm the group lead for materials recycling. So we recycle all sorts of stuff. In fact, vehicles, which is what I have here, if you guys can see it, it's a little small, but this is what happens to your car at the end of its life. It's recycled. 95% of our cars are recycled. Probably didn't think about it. I happen to love it. I walked into this job. I went to Argonne and said, hey, we have this project we're working on. And I latched onto it. It was something that I really liked. I would recommend, there are people that go both ways on this, but I would recommend thinking about what you enjoy doing, being flexible in what you're doing. But there are jobs that are at a desk. There are jobs that are in the field, rather meaning out of the plant or whatever it is. There are jobs where, you sit in front of a computer. I mean, you can really pick what you like to do and try and target that, because it should be fun. You know, everybody out here, not everybody, a lot of people just say, hey, I want to do this because I make a lot of money. You're not happy, that money's no good. I also want to say congrats for being here. I never sat in a seat like you guys did, thinking so much about what I want to do in the future. So kudos to you guys. I'll be over in the corner with something to play with. And I would recommend that you ask me any questions that you have about what does this mean? What does that mean? What do you think about this? Whatever. All right, sorry. Presentation time. So real quick, some key things about cars is 15 million cars reach the end of life every year in the United States, 35 million around the world. These numbers are actually pretty old, but that's about steady. About 75% of a car is recycled currently. That number is actually dropping because of all the plastics that are going into our cars, which aren't recycled. It's all about metals right now. And bigger yet, I'm going to get to this on the next slide, really, is batteries. These new EVs that are coming have these lithium-ion batteries. So a vehicle dismantler, junkyard, they don't like you calling them junkyards, it's auto recyclers. They pull off parts and they can reuse those parts. They sell them, or they sell them to if someone's going to remanufacture them. Things like that. They depollute a vehicle, so they take the gasoline out. Because the next thing that's going to happen after they take this car is whoops, I took that picture out, is they shred it through like a 5,000 horsepower shredder. And if there's a gas tank in it, trust me, it's actually pretty cool. But pretty soon batteries are going to be in these vehicles, and you don't want to shred a battery either, just like that. So we have to pull the batteries out. We have to transport them somewhere. And we have to take them to a recycler and recycle them. So just so you guys have an idea, when you see an EV in a picture, that's about how big the battery is in a car. So it's big. They weigh like 1,000 pounds, huge. So, and these cars are now actually they're heavier than they used to be. So what are the new jobs? That's the big question that's going to be down the road. Now, we really don't have too much of the materials in the ground to dig up to make these batteries. So we actually rely on other countries for that. And that's why I think recycling is so important, because once we buy these materials from other countries, we keep it here. We recycle it and keep the materials here so that we don't rely on these other countries. We're going to need chemists and chemical engineers to make battery materials, the stuff that goes into the batteries. We need people that are going to make the batteries out of those materials. And these are big, so in my field, redwood, they have hundreds of millions that they just got financed for. They need thousands of people. And this is just one company. That's a recycling company. Plus, we're going to build these batteries. Tens of thousands of people. I mean, there's going to be huge jobs in batteries in general. But the best part is the recycling of these batteries. At least it is for me. I love you'll see the project that I have is taking something that looks like nothing and actually making something cool out of it. I guess you get, what's that adage? Someone's trash is your treasure, whatever that is. It's really true, I think. At least I enjoy making something. old, new again. So real quick, I think I'm about out of time. On the upper left is called auto shredder residue, or fluff. So there's a pile of dirt and it goes to the landfill. There's about 5 million tons a year that goes to the landfill. This is the deviation from batteries. So, but you can see like there's a part of a tire. All of you that have taken apart you guys have all taken apart an engine, right? Okay, there's a piece of crankshaft actually too. There's a rock, there's a piece of metal trim. There's some plastic from a refrigerator, because that really goes in the shredder too. But anyway, to go from this junk that goes to the landfill to on the right are metals that we've recovered from that. And then the bottom, we go from what we call a polymer concentrate to an olefin concentrate or polypropylene concentrate, because you have to, in order to recycle things, you have to separate them into compatible species. Okay, that's why the triangle has a number on it, right? Then you can pelletize it, you can make a new part. That's a knee bolster for a car, upside down, but anyway. So to go from that pile of junk to that new knee bolster, I think is really cool. So, but there's 7 other people that do cool things today. Hopefully something will line up with what you guys are thinking, but there's so much out there. Anyway, I'll stop. I get excited about all this stuff because you guys are sitting here listening. So that's my last slide. And I think that's right around 8 minutes. So cool. Thank you for your time, guys.
Our next speaker is Ms. Aurora Alon. Ms. Alon is the Senior Director of Cybersecurity at MXC, the Digital Manufacturing Innovation Institute. Today, Ms. Alon will present an overview of 4.0 and how it's changing the way U.S. manufactures products. Welcome, Ms. Alon.
Thank you.
Can you take this off? We think we said.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful.
Sure this stays in. So when I was growing up, when I was your age, people would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I had a lot of really good answers. I wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to be a rock star. And I wanted to be a princess, because there's a lot of opportunity there. What's interesting though, and seriously, I considered medicine for a career. I'm not a doctor today. I'm actually an engineer and computer scientist. What was really interesting about my choices is when I was your age and I was asked those questions, so many things that didn't exist. So microprocessors, the things that run all of our electronics, they didn't exist. They were somebody's idea. We were developing them. Computers were so big, they were actually made out of tubes that were vacuum tubes filled with air, and they filled rooms bigger than this one. There were no telephones like cell phones. Everyone has a cell phone. And telephones are all connected to things. And they had on them. You remember those? Has anyone seen one of those? Robots, they were in the movies. Lost in Space robot from those days. These things didn't exist. There was no internet, no email, no cell phones. There was really, in my lifetime, we saw the generation of computing technology and networking technologies that really created so many of the things that we have today. And what is interesting about that is kids today, we're still seeing that innovation. And kids today that are entering primary school, so that's grade school, almost 2/3 of those kids actually, when they're finished with their education, will work in jobs that don't exist today. Isn't that kind of a cool idea? My job did not exist when I was your age. And a little date me here, but I remember being in college. I got my hands on one of the very first computers. that were ever invented. And you think computers today, you guys don't know how slow those things were. They were just plain simple big gray boxes that sat on the computer, and you didn't have things like Windows, and you had to write everything with your command line. So for those of you who have seen that in the movies or know how to program command line with Linux, it was a very, very different world. Even before that, we would make punch cards, paper cards, and we would type on them, and they would punch holes, and we read them through readers into these big computers in the room. Today, the world is very, very different. And microprocessors, computing technologies, and networking technologies are everywhere, including in factory floor. Manufacturing has changed so much. So, many of our parents, the people of my generation, had very specific skills. They knew how to do machining, metal machining, wood machining. They would be able to run pieces of equipment that they would engage very closely in. Today, manufacturing environment still does so many of those different types of things, creating plastic parts and wood parts and metal parts and assembling them together. But it's done in a much more computerized fashion. And it really is a different environment. So I work in an organization that is, we are funded by the United States government, and we are called Manufacturing Innovation Institute, MXD. And our job is to actually help enable manufacturing today to embrace all these new technologies. Manufacturing has gone through a lot of evolutions and revolutions. So how many have learned about, one of the very first manufacturing innovations, which was done by Henry Ford. And you would have an assembly line, and the parts would come through on these big mechanical things. That was actually a really interesting evolution in manufacturing, and things have changed throughout the years and decades. We're entering a time now that is called the fourth revolution of industry, manufacturing. And when we think of manufacturing, that touches everything. All the clothes that you're wearing, the food that you eat, chairs you're sitting in. Manufacturing is really the enablement of creating all of the goods, objects, things that we eat and wear and use on a daily basis. And the Industry 4.0 is the digitization. It includes so many cool things like robots and being able to do simulation. In other words, instead of having to build my manufacturing line, I can actually build it in a computer first. We call those digital twins. So it needs lots of software know-how to be able to create a simulation of the factory floor before you invest millions and millions, tens and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars buying all the equipment. You want to make sure it works first. The Internet of Things, that's every little tiny sensor thing, phone, computer, motor, everything within the environment is now connected through our networking technology. And not only do they connect in and they can tell, a single area for command and control to say, hey, I'm over here, I'm going this fast. They can even talk to each other. And so even though there might not be a human being doing a process, there still has to be a human being who creates that process through software and connectivity. And to be able to enable those processes with things like artificial intelligence, to be able to analyze those processes in order to make them bigger, so big data analytics. One of our speakers will talk about artificial intelligence. This is a really cool area. And artificial intelligence gives us the ability to actually create systems that can analyze and do pattern matching and create classifications and help people understand what's going on. We do this in cybersecurity. And cybersecurity, that's a job, that's my job. I'm a cybersecurity engineer. And so my background is in electrical engineering and computer science. This job didn't exist because, unfortunately, all this wonderful connectivity, you got bad guys out there, and the bad guys want to break in to these networks. And And I'm sure you've seen, ransomware, you've seen that in the news, very, very common. So my job is to make sure that when we pull all these technologies together, we have the ability to do so in a way that protects them against theft, service. So in some ways, I'm kind of like a technology police officer, and I use the same types of know-how of this designing and the skills to be able to ensure that you're designed in a way that resistant against some of that. Within the environment, this is just one role within the larger manufacturing environment. And there are so many jobs available. And I think people think manufacturing, that's a lot of fun. I go to a factory every day. 80% of the jobs that we're going to need within these new manufacturing plants haven't even been invented yet. People who are knowledgeable in things like big data analytics, AI, cool stuff like that. So we can talk some more about that. There's some examples. Digital product lifecycle managers, large-scale cyber physical systems engineer. What does that mean? That's the person who's responsible for making sure that all of these devices that are connected together are in fact secure, and monitoring the security of that environment, making sure that they can tell if there is a bad actor, a bad guy sneaking through. 5G wireless. These things are connected together just like our phones. So wireless engineering. Wi-Fi 6 is coming out, so new wireless technologies. There's lots of little bit different areas in there to different jobs. In a plant, my presentation is going to take you through a virtual tour of showing you what like the factory of the future looks like. And I'm getting the, hey, you're out of time. So I'm going to go through here. We are the National Center of Cybersecurity for Manufacturing. This is a very cool job. If you're interested in it. And we have lots of different opportunities that I can show you as well. So I'm going to stop here, and I appreciate your listening to me. I'm excited too. You can tell what I do. So thank you very much.
That virtual tool is actually really cool. I took a look at it earlier today, actually. Our next speaker is actually Dr. Kevin Martin, an associate professor in NIU's Department of Engineering Technology. His primary research interests include renewable energy systems, industrial energy efficiency, hybrid electric vehicles, and vertical farming. Today, Dr. Martin will be covering the career of vertical farming.
Thank you. Yeah, so let's see if we can get you back on schedule here. Yeah, so my background actually is chemical engineering, and yet I found myself doing farming. Interesting. You never know where you're going to get you. I think that's probably the takeaway that so far we've already heard. I imagine probably some of the other individuals as well. So, don't be afraid of a challenge. I've done everything from taking shipping containers and turning them into office space, so that we could address the logistics issues of all trade, where we have a lot of trade coming from outside the country into here. What do we do with all these shipping containers as they're all on a one-way trip here? Let's build housing. Great idea. I've worked on hybrid electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and then worked on building control systems, because it's a whole lot easier to control a building than it is to try to control a vehicle. The sensor readings are a whole lot less for a building than it is on a vehicle. And then I find myself now working on vertical farming and looking at especially how light impacts growth, flavor, and actually trying to figure out how to feed the world. So what is a vertical farm? It's what we call controlled environment agriculture. Produces crops on multiple different levels. You can kind of see we start stacking these 10 and 20 feet tall, or 10 and 20 layers tall, 50, 60 feet in the air, with multiple layers, multiple different crops. You can allow yourself to be able to grow fresh food, very hyper local, very close to where the consumer needs it year round. And think about this, right? So we don't have to worry about what's going on in California, what's impacting food supplies here in Chicago, or what's going on in South America impacting food supplies here in Chicago. So we look at all sorts of different areas. We look at how LED lighting, especially within an image of LEDs, we can now control what light spectrum there is. And so we can see how that impacts, especially, flower formation, root formation, stimulate growth. We look at watering. You see there's a common theme here. Unlike maybe somebody that look at specific area, this is something that requires skills in so many different areas. You're needing, biology, chemistry, engineering, computer programming. We actually use based off of a Raspberry Pi system to control this. You guys might not be familiar with the Raspberry Pi, or maybe you're not. See some shaking heads. Yes. Python programmers out there. Anybody? Yes. Well, it's one of the most required highly programming languages there are now, besides Java. We run this off of this. Thinking about my old days, right? In 8086, that was 43 megahertz, and now this Raspberry Pi that costs $40 is more than what they had to take you to the moon. And so now we can now do these types of things like this. So we use reduced watering. We work off hydroponics or even aquaponic type systems where you actually grow fish, as well as the fish provide the nutrients that then feed the plants. So then we can actually create proteins and vegetables at the same time. So we look at why you'd even care about this, and we look at the yield and look at the transportation. We have a traditional open field that might require 2,000 miles of transportation. Well, how does this impact then the environment, right? I have to spend quite a bit of fossil fuel or even electric. Then the question is, where does electric come from? Until we get the grid totally renewable. Thank you to Dr. Chang. Right here, we'll talk about, I believe, solar probably, I imagine. So until we get the grid to, how do we move these a bit? And all the transportation that comes along with it. So, why do we care about these types of things? And you think about what the need is, look at the need for food in the world. We're going to have to increase food supplies by 70% because of almost a 50% increase in population. So yeah, I see those eyes going bing. You think there's going to be a job there? Maybe. Water. We have speakers talking about water and the water needs and how to do that. Agriculture represents 70% of all the water, fresh water withdrawals globally. I just told you we had to increase food. Where are we going to come up from that water if we don't come up with better ways to control the water? And by the way, 2/3 of the world's population already live in water-stressed regions already. So the water resources are already limited as it is. So we have a growing population growing in areas that don't already have water at all. And now we have to increase the food by dramatic. Fossil fuel usage, of course, as agriculture uses quite a bit for the tractors. Yes, there are LEDs. Yes, they require electricity. Can't deny it, don't deny it. But yet, how can we produce that? Do we do big field ag? We can turn those into electrics. Yes, there's research going on to that field. There also is looking at, can we use renewable energy to then power the LEDs that we run for these vertical farms as well? And then we don't have the transportation needs as well. So you have to look at what we call the whole life cycle from start to finish. What is total energy usage in some of these areas? Cropland, again, we need the area basically of almost Brazil. We'll just kick everyone in Brazil out. Just turn into a giant farm field. Problem solved. Simple engineer. I'm an energy efficiency expert by trade. It's an efficient area, right? Just kick everyone out and call it Brazil. Call it food land. I like it. Not really. That's what we're talking about. How are we going to think about this? Think about the food insecurity issues. Take it local here for a second. Forget about the global. We'll just be the me. There's many areas in the Chicago area and many metropolitan areas that look what we refer to as food deserts. You have no access to any fresh local foods at all, or very, very limited. Take it to the rural areas. I still can. Where do I get a strawberry right now? I live in DeKalb. There's farm fields right out there. If I get it now, where it came from? Probably South America, maybe Florida. So can I grow this stuff here locally? What's some of the challenges? High initial costs, high operational costs, like the energy bit. This is where the engineers and you guys would be tackling, trying to figure out how to improve this. We touch on things like Internet of Things. There's sensors galore in my vertical farm, trying to constantly cut down the costs. And the sensors, the prices go drop, 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 cheap, 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 cheap. So then how can we get the best data? We was touching about big data analytics. We have so much data coming around. It's artificial intelligence, other speakers will talk about. That we take visual images of the plants and try to let the plants tell us exactly what they need when they need it. We talk about in our vertical farm right here, we do everything, just a picture of a small bit. We have world-class capabilities to addressing the different wavelengths of light, and specifically looking at how that affects flavor compounds. So that we can adjust the different lighting. Because we have different chemicals that are being produced and they absorb light in different bits. So I have to understand physics, you have to understand chemistry, you have to understand biology, you have to understand programming. All sorts of different areas. Computer vision, creating different algorithms to be able to track the leaf growth as they come around. Looking at infrared imaging, all sorts of different sensors and data come around to let the plant tell us, hey, this is what we need. Can you tell us what we need? So here's the leaf time. So we know from studies that actually other national labs actually be able to look at leaf temperatures and being able to understand photosynthesis. So we have all sorts of different data that comes around. But some really the local benefits, again, imagine living in a place where you actually grow your own food and live there at the same time. Pretty neat idea. At least I think so. Again, you can see we all kind of get exactly what it is. Locally, $400 million is the green market. I think there's jobs there. That's locally. Forget the rest of the country. I'm in Chicago. Not really, I'm Southern Illinois. It doesn't point. $400 million right there. Looking at education, so you can actually have people that do job training. And then from the environment, looking at retaining old factories and actually looking at how to reinvent spaces that would have normally been eyesores and depressed property values, and actually turning them into growing spaces, like this old steel factory in New Jersey, turned into a growing environment. You see here is what some pictures. The picture on the upper is actually it. And one final parting thought, you might not know who BlackRock is, you're just the largest asset manager in the world. So might have a few dollars, to sway on things. CEO recently, just in October last year, just believe what he thought the next 1,000 unicorns are really these major companies having billion-dollar values. And thinking about green hydrogen, green agriculture, green steel, and green cement. These are where some of the growth areas that they expect to be. Thank you.
Our speaker is Dr. Mohammed Mohi. Dr. Mohi is an assistant professor in NIU's Department of Electrical Engineering. His research focuses primarily on developing microsystems and flexible electronics to address human health-related problems. Today, he will be introducing biomedical engineering as a career path. Welcome, Dr. Mohi.
Thank you very much. I'm assistant professor in electrical engineering department, but I do a lot of research in biomedical engineering. So I'm also teaching biomedical engineering courses at NIU. So today we'll be talking about biomedical engineering. Basically, it's combining engineering principle with medical science to design, create equipment, devices, softwares needed for biomedical engineering and address human health problems. So you can find yourself as a biomedical engineering R&D facilities, manufacturing, hospitals, universities, educational centers, and medical institutes. So the median annual wage in America is $95K for electrical engineer. Therefore, biomedical for electrical, it's not that much difference of this as well. Again, depends on where you work, it's the growth rate before pandemic was over 4% for biomedical engineering, but this is the speculation is after COVID and the needs for technology more in health, basically it's also going higher and we need more engineers. So what do you do as biomedical engineer and a little bit of also electrical? Some of them can be taken care of by electrical engineers. You can make artificial internal organs to replace the body organs. That's a very hot research in last few years that basically we can save lives if we can have replacement for body parts, especially for vital organs like heart. There's a company that developed food basically a few years ago, and there was something in use a few months ago that basically was replaced in one patient and be able to work fully functional artificial heart. So you can design biomedical equipment and devices. For example, you can design diagnostic devices, surgical tools. So for diagnosis, specifically, one trend in this field is home health monitoring and wearable devices that we can evaluate our health at home and communicate with our medical doctor. This is way more important during the pandemic when we had some trouble with the hospitals that were filled with the patients. So if we can take care of people in remote way, that reduce load on hospitals and medical centers. So we can also train clinicians, surgeons, and other personnel to use this instrument. So this instrument will go to hospitals and people use them. So the surgeons in surgeries, there is typically in the room, there's some biomedical engineers, depends on level of surgery, the one that involve many equipment. There's an engineer there to make sure everything working properly. So we can also evaluate the safety, efficiency of the equipment, new devices or existing devices, and maintenance of them as well, provide support. So we can also involve in the research aspect of biological systems. For example, there is a lot of research on robotic surgery, so it would reduce any human errors into the surgery if a robot can take care of surgery and overview by human. Smart drugs, that's another thing basically that we can make capsule that have electronic and sensor inside and you can track the drug. That's a trend, and there are some research. Wearable technologies, as I mentioned, IoT, you can stay at home and doctor can evaluate your health status. Medical virtual reality for clinical training and physical rehabilitation. Basically, the clinician can just do a surgery, think that they're doing surgery and get trained without basically working on the real human body, virtual reality. And also I see proposal that coming out of mental health and rehabilitation, virtual reality as well. Also neural technology and brain is very hot research in the last couple of years. I see a lot of research going to brain. We don't know a lot about brain. Still, there is a lot of research going on to understand only one functionality. I see people get funded for a lot of, $5-10 million, just one group, just to understand a part of the brain. So there's a lot of, I receive email every day from initiatives that we have. And you can work, there are a lot of opportunities as engineer, whether you make equipment or you work on or you basically design, do research, or any fronts these companies typically work on different fronts. And if even these are like conventional, traditional biomedical companies, but if you look at like big companies like Google now has health centers, I see students get job offer for health from Apple, from Google. So Apple do ECG and equipment to their personal electronics. So there are a lot more coming every day. 3M, Boston Scientific, there are very traditional one that make medical devices. So at NIU, we have biomechanics and biomaterial, specifically for biomedical. And we also have biomedical instrumentations. We have different that basically teach the students about instrumentation, sensor signal processing. We also have different labs at NIU that we specifically have a clean room that can make sensors over there. Based a lot of our students that they do electrical, they give job offer at Intel and this large facility to make microelectronics. So today we're gonna use a specific sensor. We can't find it in a store, but we can just use this a specific blood pressure that it's automatic and it's a home health monitoring. It's very cheap now. It's like $30, $40 for a medical device cheap. So it is cheap and you can just measure. And I have this, you can just sync it with phone and keep track of blood pressure every day if you want to. And your doctor, when I go to doctor, I show them my blood pressure, so how it is. So, and you're welcome to use that today. And basically how it works is very simple, right? So basically it's a cup, you increase the pressure inside cup with air. And then what it is, it's basically close the artery and the blood stop. So if you put the stethoscope to listen, and used to go to the doctor, we just use the stethoscope to listen to the blood flow. So you play, you stop the flow, so it will stop, then let the cup again gets back to original place. So the blood start to go. The first sound you hear, that's going to give you systolic, and the second one is going to give you diastolic. So high pressure and low pressure. It's basically to get the pressure of the cup, not the pressure, actual pressure in the vein. So that's what systolic, diastolic pressure is. And ideally it should be 120 and 80. All right, so I think we're off the time. Any question?
I have two kids that might become surgeon one day, heart surgeon and whatnot. But the question is, how can we prepare kids to, like, there's so much technology, so much documentation out there, so many resources out there. Find out exactly, so you want to become a cardiologist. And what we just saw that it's going to happen by machine. She's going to operate. And the surgeon still required, or 10 years from now, it's going to be obsolete.
Right now, there are people using a lot of technology when you go to operation room, but they're still mostly they rely on human skills right now. But probably like 20 years, things are changing. We're actually hiring better of course, hiring, but they're hiring like expected for our medical, for our biomedical program that we do all on the robotic surgery. A lot of them. And basically, based on it, there are a lot of Northwestern and Rockport, there are a lot of places, hospitals now, they have robots there that doctors can rely on a specific task. But it's coming. But still, you need to be a surgeon. So it doesn't mean that you don't need human or surgeons. So it's going to be an assistant.
As parents, we're confused because I think I'm not working. We say, okay, you're going to be the doctor, this is concentrate on biology and certain subjects, not in the engineering field. So is that something as parents we should tell them both options at this point?
Right now, we have the students here that they did actually biomedical engineering. We have the students here. So they counted, then they go to medical school. So basically, we're also working on a specific program like PMED here in non-engineering. We talked to our dean like a few months ago that basically make a specific program for that. But now our biomedical engineering, because we teach biology, we have chemistry, we have all of things, and also teach engineering. So it's
yeah, it's a school nowadays. It's not teaching at the school level. They're not saying, okay, take specific class in engineering. We mainly focus on biology and chemistry, and that's when we know that health teacher is not going to be there. Certain field, that's not going to be really there anymore. So,
a philosophy, and then I is basically teach broad, even for future students already, but many things have this kind, they have the vision and have the skills to be ready for future. Yeah, and my time is up. All right, thank you.
Speaker is Dr. Newman Chang, an assistant professor in NIU's chemistry department. He leads a research group that develops new materials for energy sustainability. He will talk about technologies that integrate renewable electricity for transportation, chemical manufacturing, and chemical fuels. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today. I also want to thank Judy for the opportunity to speak with you. It's actually my first time of doing this STEM fest. I actually don't have a slide. I want to apologize for that. I thought it's just come here and talk. So I'm going to talk with you sustainable energy. So we are talking about the future. And futures has uncertainties. So I want you to think instead of talking about what's going to change, talk about what's not going to change. Work with energy. Things like we still need to travel, right? We go from here to Chicago. In the future, we still do the same thing. But we want to travel fast. We want to travel safe. We don't want to pay the big bill, right? In the future, we still need to heat up our house in the winter, house in the summer. Right? So the message here is we will need energy. And the question is where we get energy from. Right now, we use gas for our car, the natural gas for powering the house. And these are what we call the fossil fuels. And fossil fuels, very good in its property, use carbon dioxide. Something is causing environmental problems. So another problem for fossil fuels is we are limited in resources. I think we are very comfortable right now. I mean, we have fossil fuels and not thinking about the problem of energy, but down the road, after 100 years, 200 years, we will run out of fossil fuels. So how are we going to power our house? We can thinking about what's not going to, well, what will you have? What will you have sustainable? We will have our sun. Sun always shine. I mean, if the sun is not shining, then we have a bigger problem. We will have wind to blow. So this, I mean, the term called sustainable energy. We get energy from sun, get energy from wind, so-called renewable electricity. So using renewable electricity for our energy, this goes to electric vehicles. Tesla is a good example. So how are we going to get there? If I do a survey like how many of you buy Tesla today, the number is not that big, right? We can ask why. We have concerns with when Tesla may get fired. It's a long time to charge. It's too expensive. All the problem goes to the batteries. So as a research need, we find a good battery, then we can bring the cost down, make it very reliable. And once we get there, we need the jobs to make, many of these cars. And you can imagine how many cars we need. So this is one scenario. Another thing is when we work with solar energy, work with wind, the fundamental problem is they are not always available. We go to the home in the night, the sun is no longer there. If we solely rely on solar energy, then our house is dark. So how can we solve this problem? Now we need something called chemical fuels. So basically convert this renewable energy, like in the 12 o'clock, a big sun, and then we convert this energy into chemical fuels. For this, I want to introduce hydrogen. I don't know if you heard about hydrogen, but hydrogen is the lightest material on Earth. It's a great material. You may heard about hydrogen explosion. it's basically explode when mixed with oxygen and a high temperature. But why I talk with you on hydrogen? Well, the thing is, with hydrogen, we can make a device called fuel cells. Instead of burning hydrogen with oxygen, with the open flame, we can burn electrochemically and convert this to electricity. When we do this, we have a hydrogen fuel cell. And this is actually not a new technology. NASA, like 60, 70 years ago, this Apollo project go to the moon, can think how they power their aircraft. That's with fuel cell. So basically they carry a hydrogen tank, the oxygen tank on board that give you the electricity. So that is fuel cell, but this is for NASA. We move this device to our cars, then we have another mechanism to power our cars. It's called fuel cell powered cars. Toyota is actually commercializing this kind of vehicle in California because they have hydrogen fuel station over there. But these are the technology. Next question I want to address is where we get the hydrogen from. You may think, oh yeah, hydrogen is nice, but where are they? We actually have a lot of hydrogen, way more than you imagine. And that is, we have hydrogen in water. We have a lot of water, right? The ocean, the river, the lakes. But the problem is how we get hydrogen out. Well, we can do it using technology called electrochemical water splitting. Basically, break water molecule into hydrogen molecule, and another is oxygen molecule. Now I talk about sustainability, and we can imagine we will have water, right? We will have sun, we will have wind, and 100 years later, when we run out of fossil fuel, and if we can get hydrogen from water using solar energy, then we are in pretty good shape. I don't know how much minutes are. 1 minute, okay. So hydrogen is I would say a big deal for the future. You ask me where we first see hydrogen using in our daily life. I would most likely first go to a bigger scale, something like a big trucks, stationary, a power grid, this kind of things. Down the road, it's likely that we see some passenger vehicles. So that's all I have for today. I was thinking about making a hydrogen fuel cell for the demo, but I didn't have that. But I will have one available sometime later. So if you come to NIU Fest in the future, you will see me busy. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Speaker is Dr. Megan Brown. Dr. Brown is an assistant professor in NIU's Department of Earth, Atmosphere, and Environment. He previously worked as a geologist at an environmental consulting firm and now currently teaches courses in geology and hydrogeology. Today, Dr. Brown will be discussing careers and topics of environmental geoscience, including water resources and groundwater remediation. Welcome, Dr. Brown.
Thank you. So, I'm a little biased, but I think geology is the best. All the people love their jobs and they're all awesome. but I'm sorry, geology is way better. I'll tell you why. If you like math, and you also like chemistry, we have a job for that. If you like physics and chemistry, we have a job for that. Even if you like bio, which is like, but if you like bio and chemistry and physics, we have jobs. We have a lot of jobs. And so I'm not gonna really talk too much about brand new jobs, like Dr. Chen was saying. I'm gonna talk about what we already have and what we're gonna need more of. So, if you brush your teeth today, please stand up. Oh, okay. Sit down.
Oh, yeah.
So you probably use water. People are okay with dirty water. I asked this at the beginning of like every one of my classes, and every now and then I get one that's like, I'm okay. Yeah, most people don't aren't. And there's a limited places that we can get water. So if you're thinking about what some sources might be, maybe you're thinking things like ice, groundwater, maybe lakes, right? Really close to the Great Lakes, swamps, rivers, and then of course the ocean. When you come to my station, I'll show you exactly how much water we have that is usable. It's not a lot. Most of it is in the ocean. So let's get that. And it's getting harder. We need more water. Some of the reasons are we need more food, more energy, but also we got to think about climate change. So on the left here, we have a map showing how much water withdrawals would change, meaning how much they would increase without climate change. So if we were able to switch off climate change completely, stop it right now, this is how much we would need. You'd still need way more in the American West, in the South. We'd be like, okay. But with climate change, the entire country needs more water and a lot more water. So geology can help with that. Again, this is another map just showing where there's areas of water stress. This means that you need more than 40% more water than they have. Again, the American West is one of the areas that's most stressed and continues to be stressed. But if you look up near Lake Michigan, close to Chicago, we're right up there. We're gonna need a lot more water. And just having water isn't enough. Taking too much water can cause really big problems, which of course goes back to geology. So one of the things that can happen that's really interesting is if you take out too much water in certain areas, the land can actually sink. So if you look all the way to the right, this is an example in California. They have some big subsidence or subsidence problems. So if you can look towards the top in 1925, so almost 100 years ago, that's where the land was. That very top yellow number. The man standing at the bottom for you to see. This photo was taken in 1977. The land had dropped all the way to his feet. Here's another picture, similar, 1965, at the top of the white with black letters, that was in 1965. In 2016, when that photo was taken, that's where the land was. It sinks when you take out too much water. You can actually see this with satellite images, which is really cool. And this is another cool thing about geology. There are so many different tools you can use. If you like to be in a lab, you can work in a lab. You can really interesting instruments to figure out chemistry, to figure out physical properties of rocks. In the middle, one of my former students, Mazi, he's working to figure out how easily water flows through a rock, which is pretty cool. If you're interested in being outside, you can be outside. We have a drill rig actually at Northern Illinois University. It's really cool. We put in a well at least one a year. You can also do things like stream studies. Go out on rivers or lakes and do work. Use cool toys like drones. Has anyone flown a drone? Yes, I haven't yet. I'm like super jealous of you. But we can use drones to figure out groundwater stuff, to figure out different things about rocks. all these different things about natural hazards, earthquakes and landslides and volcanoes. And then of course, you can also use computers and satellites and any combination of this. So if you don't like being outside, you still got a job for. If you want to be outside the whole time, you definitely have a job for that. Ecology, about water, to find more water. But you also might want to clean it up. So this is what I did after I got my undergraduate degree, my master's degree. I worked for about 5 years in environmental consulting, cleaning up mostly gasoline spills. This was one of our sites that we ended up putting this large remediation system in, and it was a system that actually cleaned up the groundwater. We pumped it out of the ground, cleaned it, and then injected it back in. This was when we were putting in the system rather. This is me. So if you want to like run equipment, you can do that too. Fun. If you want to help make the environment better, if you want to help make water or other resources more accessible to everyone, think about things like social justice issues, give jobs for that. Geology can really focus on that. And we pay pretty well. So in 2020, the median salary for a geologist was about $93,000 per year. It's not too bad. Most of the jobs, all you need is a bachelor's degree. There's plenty of really cool stuff if you want to go back like I did and do a master's degree or a PhD or both. But a lot of jobs you can do with just an undergraduate degree. You don't really need a lot of other experience. People teach you on the job for a lot of those jobs. There's a lot of them and it's still growing. Thousands of jobs, new jobs each year. So come see me at my booth and ask me all about different things. I have a lot more to tell you about water. I have cool tools of the trade there. And then we can also talk about things like earthquakes, landslides, volcanoes, because all those things are directly related to helping people. That's a pretty good job.
So our next speaker is Mr. Antonio Deval. Mr. Antonio Deval is a master's student at Biological Sciences at the NSF Graduate Fellowship at NIU study, and studies how various restoration activities impact grassland birds in the Illinois and Indiana area during their breeding seasons and other areas of wildlife ecology. Welcome.
Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to Dr. Brown for highlighting some things regarding the environment. I think this will be a pretty good segue into talking more about those issues. So hi, I'm Antonio Devalle. I'm a master's student at Northern Illinois University, and today I'm going to talk about ecosystem restoration. And first, I want to emphasize that this field is very new. Ecosystem restoration as a scientific field is only 30 years old. So there's a lot of developing research and ideas about this field. And when I was your age, I had no idea what ecosystem restoration was. So you all are ahead of the game and you're going to learn about what this field is, and hopefully that'll prepare you to decide whether this is an interesting job field for you to pursue in the future. So first, let's start out with defining ecosystem restoration. And first, I'm going to provide some definitions for you. So what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is a community of plants and animals interacting with the physical environment. What is restoration? Restoration is returning something to a former owner, place, or condition. And since we're talking about ecosystems, we're going to focus on condition. So we're returning an ecosystem back to a previous condition. So combining those two words together, ecosystem restoration is assisting the recovery of degraded, damaged, or destroyed ecosystems. So if we look at this valley, for example, you can see that it is being degraded by the factory in the middle of it. And if we wanted to restore this valley to better help the environment, we would need to know what this valley looked like before the factory was there. So context is super important. So in Illinois, what does ecosystem restoration look like? I'm sure you know if you go driving out of the city anywhere during the summertime, especially, what do you see? Tons and tons of cornfields, right? So in Illinois, historically, corn wasn't everywhere, right? Corn was planted by humans. So what did Illinois look like before humans planted corn? Well, the dominant habitat type in Illinois was tall grass prairie. And through colonization, humans converted prairie to row crop agriculture, and we lost over 99% of our prairie. So ecosystem restoration in Illinois would be trying to turn this cornfield back into tallgrass prairie. And this involves a lot of hard work. It's a very long process, which I won't get into detail during this presentation. But if you have any questions about how this happens, please ask me at my booth. So at this point, you might be wondering, well, Tony, you said ecosystems aren't just plants, right? They're animals too. So you'd be correct. We really need to focus on what types of animals are in these prairies. So we can convert the cornfields back into prairie, but how do we attract animals back to the prairie? So some animals like birds and butterflies and bees, they have wings, right? So if they're attracted to prairies, they're probably going to find their way to the prairies by themselves. But other animals like turtles, they might have a harder time finding the prairie by themselves. So, you know, what do we do to get these animals to come back to the prairie if they're not able to do so by themselves? And a wonderful example of this here in Illinois and in Indiana, where I conduct my research, are bison. So bison historically roamed across Illinois, but bison are huge and they can't cross, they can't come all the way to Illinois from Yellowstone by themselves, right? That'd be crazy. So how do we get bison back here in Illinois? We're going to watch a really cool video from one of my study sites to learn more about how we do this and maybe more importantly, why it's so important to bring bison back. Let's see if I can get the video to play.
Prairie used to be a really important ecosystem in Indiana, especially this corner of the state. Almost all of that prairie has been either severely impacted or plowed under today. Far less than 1% of original native prairie remains.
At Kankakee Sands, our goal is really about creating connectivity for biological diversity. The Nature Conservancy Indiana was able to acquire 7,200 acres of row crop agriculture. And over the past 20 years, we've converted 6,700 acres of that to very diverse planted prairie.
The first step was a lot of planning, hoping that you can do it, and then finding the people with the same passion that you have, and then the resources and the tools that you need to do the job. Each year, we did about 500 acres of prairie restoration. Nature's kind of in control now, but we got the process started, and being a part of that has been very rewarding.
Most plants and animals have been able to make it back on their own. Bison was one of those that we had to make a concerted effort to bring back and do it for all the right reasons.
In October of 2016, we brought 23 bison from South Dakota to the Kankakee Sands Preserve in Indiana.
They got off the truck in about 5 hours. They were settled like they had never left. It's one of the highlights of my career.
The reason we brought bison to the prairie is to use them as a conservation tool. When bison graze grass, what it does is start to give a competitive advantage for all the neighbors of that plant. And so over time, what you see is a reduced dominance of grass and increased abundance of other plants.
It's really about restoring those old interactions between plants and animals for the sake of the ecosystem.
There's been a massive increase in visitation, people calling the office, asking what we're about. The managing prairie at the scale that we are is a really rare thing this far east. So to see more people here is very gratifying.
Bison are an animal that inspires people's imaginations. People think of bison, they think of large landscapes, and think of America. We've got great records from around the site. Bison were here in great numbers. It just makes sense to bring back the native Kankakee sand.
All right, great. So you might be thinking, wow, bison are super cool. I love prairies. What are some jobs in this field? So like I said before, ecosystem restoration is a very young field. So there's still a lot of ecosystems that need to be restored, which are jobs that are already happening. We saw some of the folks that are doing some of that important work. So those jobs are available and will be available in the future. But talking about future jobs more in depth, what are some of the big problems that face ecosystem restoration as a field? So first of all, since it's such a young field, do we really know, is ecosystem restoration working properly? Are we really bringing back an ecosystem that is working and functioning on its own by itself? So important jobs to answer that question are being a restoration ecologist or an ecological researcher like me. How will climate change impact restoration efforts? So in our ever-changing world, we need to try and figure out how ecosystems will be impacted in the future by changing climate. So important jobs to answer that question will be being a climate ecologist or being a climate scientist. And then lastly, how can we make restoration work to benefit the environment and people? So we can see that we're doing great things with the environment, but how does that impact people, and how can we make our work be an overall benefit for people? So jobs, to help answer that question, will be working in environmental policy or socio-environmental research. Thank you all.
Speaker and next and final speaker before we go into the rotations is Dr. Jipu Tan, who is an assistant professor in NIU's Department of Mechanical Engineering. Dr. Tan has a background in performance computing and mathematical modeling as it applies to blood flow. Dr. Tan will be talking about artificial intelligence careers and the fundamentals of machine learning with examples based on images.
We have PDF.
All right, I think my job is here is to give you a wave since I'm the last speaker. All right, so my topic is about machine learning in fluid mechanics. How many of you have heard of like machine learning or artificial intelligence? Please raise your hand. Seems most of you. What comes to your mind when you heard of artificial intelligence? Could you give me an example? Yes. Tesla, excellent. Actually, that's why I have a picture showing up there. It shows that a Tesla autonomous driving car, right? And then just ask yourself for a second, how do you teach your car to drive itself? I don't know, right? So this is what the computer, the chips inside the car need to recognize. For example, when the car is on the road, the car needs to recognize all the cars, right? And then it needs to recognize the lanes, pedestrians, parking lane, buildings, traffic signs, right? Think about it. How we can teach a car to drive itself? This is, basically what Tesla does is, what any other self-driving car does is, they provide a lot of sensors like cameras, lidars, infrared sensors to detect the object distance, cause, all those kind of things. And then they have a chip. That computer chip is going to, based on those inputs, to generate a few outputs or decision for the car. For example, right now, based on the current situation, you need to keep driving, or you need to stop, or you need to turn the steer so that you can change the lane, right? And then it turns out that we use neural network. It's the one shown in this figure. They have a lot of dots connected together. They form very complicated neural network. As you can imagine, that names comes from the brain cells in humans, because we want to use the same mechanism to do those information processions such that we can make decisions. So essentially, we want to find the relationship between the inputs such as the environment conditions, and then outputs, you ask the car to decide, should you keep driving or stop or change lanes, right? But can we name that relationship? It's not as simple as like 1 + 1 = 2, right? That is very, very complicated. And then there's no way we can define specific rules. Or if we can define it, the rules will become very, very complicated. So that's why we need a neural network to approximate very complicated functions. So since I mentioned a neural network, some of you may be confused, like, what's a neural network? It looks like very complicated. But I can give you another example. So how many of you would consider go to college? Raise your hand. Right, when you think about it, what would be the most or some of the most important factors when you apply to college? What kind of application material do you need to provide? Yes?
Demographics, academic history.
Academic history, right? Or like something like GPA, right? If you have high GPA, probably you will get to a good school. Is GPA enough? Probably not. Maybe like a standard test, right?
Not at NIU.
But NIU, okay. All right, I think I didn't update it. So, but it used to be the case, you need to provide that one. And then you use resume, right? And probably some reference. And then you submit a whole package of your application, and then it's into school. If they like it, yes, you get the offer. If you are unlucky, you just, no, right? But can we find a formula? So that based on the documents you have, you submit it so that I can tell you, hey, you will get to NIU, for example, or no. Have you ever wondered about that? So what we want to do is we want to find a relationship between the results, your admission results, as well as all those factors or documents you provided, right? the most simple approach would be, hey, I just do the average of them, right? So say, hey, let's, for example, we take 4 different factors and each of them take 25%, right? And then we can simplify that because if you want to study STEM field, then you need to convert those formula into mathematical expressions. So that's why I put it over there. You get the result y, and then weight multiplied by some factors, right? And then we decide if that weighted average result is bigger than some threshold value you are in. If not, no. Right? That's what we call activation function in neural network. Actually, that's the unit of a neuron. Neuron just made up a bunch of all those things, a lot of them. That's the simplest neuron, right? So hopefully after this presentation, you will say, hey, I know a little bit about neural network. And then, of course, for complicated problems such as like recognize a dog and a cat using neural networks, you have to use a lot of them. And then you need to figure out all those weights, as well as some correction parameter B. And then we need to use programming or some algorithm to determine the best fit for the given data. That's why we need the training data as well as testing data. Once you get those parameters, you can use to predict other images. For example, you can use it for the Tesla to detect if that's a person, or if that's another car, or if that's a tree, right? And then based on those information, you can make a decision. You should just keep it running or stop or make turns. That being said, those models are just based on data, but we are living in the physical world that is governed by physical laws. For example, like the Newton's second law, the law of motion, or like conservation of mass. Conservation of mass essentially means all the people comes into this room, they're going to leave later, unless you want to stay here overnight. That's the conservation of mass. We use conservation of mass, momentum, energy, we can solve problems, not just based on data, because those data probably they don't have any relationship at all. But we want to incorporate those physical laws into the neural network model. For example, this picture shows the temperature distribution as well as the airflow velocity over a cup of coffee. We only provide the temperature distribution, then you can use neural network to predict what would be that velocity, right? So, and then in my lab, we do using physically informed neural network for fluid structure induction. Those are very expensive ones. We want to use neural network once we figure out training with those accurate simulation. We can get those parameters, and then we can use those parameters to predict the other flow conditions. And then those are the results. I'm going to skip that because that's get too technical. And then in the end, I will get to the topics you guys are all interested in jobs. First, I would thank you. Laura mentioned that the digital twin. Actually, I'm from mechanical engineering, and so I feel I may need to talk a little bit more about that. So, digital twin basically is a computer representation of physical system. It could be the building, could be a bridge, could be any factory floor, or any kind of thing, as long as you can make a digital copy of that. It can be used for design, manufacturing, control, optimization, as well as service. Let's take service, for example. If we can detect there's some structural damage to the bridge, then we can fix it earlier instead waiting until the end, it may collapse, or once it collapses, a lot of trouble, like maybe people's lives will be lost, damage to the properties, those kind of things, right? So for that one, and then I believe there are a lot of jobs related to that. You want to get there, you need to have some fundamental skills. For example, math, physics, engineering, programming, and probably communication skills. So probably, I think in the future, the major you're learning is probably the boundary between different majors will become blurred. What matters most is what you can do. So I think That's one example I gave. And then another example would be to a patient-specific modeling. This is the project I'm doing for a patient's blood flow in a patient retina network. Because if you host a visually look at the vein on your left-hand side, left hand, your vein, the distribution would be different from mine. So your geography, your data would be different from mine. So ideally, we would like to create some personalized healthcare. We scan all those information about your vascular network. And then we can provide a more accurate prediction about the blood flow, cardiovascular disease, all those kind of things. Since we can create a digital twin for the physical system, why couldn't we create a digital twin for you or for me, right? I believe that will be the future. And then that concludes to my presentation. And in the end, in my station, we will have a game you can play with so that you can draw different cats or dogs so that you can see if the computer can tell if can recognize your drawing. Thank you very much.
So now that the talks are over, we're going to divide everyone into stations. So what's going to happen is there's 3 speakers in here, and there's 3 total rooms. So you've got 3 speakers here, 2 speakers in room 2, and another 3 speakers in the last room. And the way you'll know which, and you're going to be able to rotate. So we're going to have every 16 minutes. So you're going to be able to talk with all the speakers in here, all of just be able to talk one-on-one. So we're gonna have groups of about 5. So we're gonna have the front row first, make your way to the back station, and you're gonna get assigned group A. So just and then we'll go by rows. So everyone will get a sticker that has A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or H, which for all 8 speakers. Groups A and B and C are gonna be in here. B and E in the second room. F, D, and H, and every 6 to 8 minutes, we're gonna rotate to the next.
Yeah.
Stick around. Once again, pizza and QR code. I hope you guys had a nice time.
Okay.
Really